My dad's ranch, the only place I ever called home, was stolen from me before I could even step foot on it. The homeowners association built their fancy houses on my land, then sent me a letter demanding $250,000, claiming I was the trespasser. I could still see Dad's face, promising me this ranch would be mine one day, right before his heart gave out. They thought they could bully me, a nobody mechanic, but they didn't know I'd fight back with everything I had. This was war, and I was ready to win. If you love stories where the little guy takes on the big shots, subscribe to our channel for more. My name was John Carter, just a guy who fixed cars in the city. When Dad passed last winter, his will turned my world upside down. The 150-acre ranch in Willow Creek, far from my tiny apartment, went to me, not my sister or cousins. They figured I'd sell it fast, but that land was Dad's pride, every hill and fence tied to his memory. I drove out a month later, my old pickup rattling on the dirt road. The house was a mess, but the land was perfect, green fields, a small creek, and big open skies. I walked the property, remembering Dad's stories, until I hit the northern edge. That's when I saw it, a shiny fence slicing through my land, and behind it, 6 huge houses with pools and perfect grass. My chest tightened. Those houses didn't belong there. I dug out Dad's old property map from a rusty tin box. The lines were clear. 2 acres of my ranch were now part of Lakeview Estates, a gated community run by a pushy HOA. I hit the county office the next day, flipping through old records. My hands itched with anger. 10 years back, when Dad was too sick to check the land, the HOA had moved their fence onto our property. They built those houses without a word, betting no one would care. A surveyor I called confirmed it. The HOA had taken my land. I set up a meeting with their board, hoping we could sort it out. Wrong move. The HOA president, Margaret Hayes, sat across from me in their fancy clubhouse, her smile sharp as a blade. "Mr. Carter, what's this about?" she asked, like she was clueless. 4 other board members stared at me, their suits screaming money. I spread out my map and county records. "You've built 6 houses on my land," I said, keeping my voice even. "We need to fix this." Margaret's smile stayed put. "That's ridiculous. Those property lines were set years ago." I pointed to the records. 2 acres of my ranch are under your houses. That's not set, that's stealing. The room went quiet. Then Tom Reed, a loud board member, leaned in. "Look, kid, Lakeview Estates is a top-notch community. You can't just show up with some old map and stir trouble." I gripped the table edge. "I'm not stirring trouble. I'm taking back what's mine." Margaret leaned back, her eyes like ice. "We have lawyers, Mr. Carter. Push this, and you'll lose everything. Or we can offer you $20,000 to walk away." I nearly laughed. 2 acres and 6 houses were worth millions. "That's not enough," I said, getting up. "You'll hear from me." Next morning, a certified letter landed at my door. The HOA was suing me for $250,000, saying I'd harassed their board and trespassed on their land. My blood ran hot. They were on my ranch, and now they were coming for me. I stared at the HOA's letter, my hands itching to tear it apart. They thought they could scare me with a $250,000 lawsuit, but they didn't know I was already planning my next move. That night, I sat in Dad's old study, the air thick with dust and memories. I found a folder tucked behind some books labeled Ranch Notes. Inside was a bombshell, a handwritten note from Dad saying the HOA had been using our creek for their water supply. They never asked permission. My jaw dropped. They weren't just stealing my land. They were siphoning my water too. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me. I called my buddy Mike, who worked at the county water board. "John, you're sitting on gold," he said after I explained. "If that creek's on your land, they're breaking the law." I grinned for the first time in days. The HOA had no idea what was coming. The next day, I went back to the ranch and walked the creek. Sure enough, I found a hidden pipe running from my water to their community. It was buried under some bushes, like they thought no one would notice. I took pictures and sent them to Mike. He promised to dig into it. Meanwhile, the HOA wasn't slowing down. I got a call from a guy named Richard, one of their lawyers. "Mr. Carter, drop this nonsense about the property line," he said, his voice smooth but mean. "Pay the $250,000, or we'll drag you to court and take your whole ranch." I laughed. "You're on my land, pal. Maybe you should check your own maps." He got quiet, then hung up. That afternoon, Margaret Hayes herself showed up at the ranch with Tom Reed. They stood on my porch, looking like they owned the place. "You're making a big mistake," Margaret said, her eyes narrow. "We've got the best lawyers in the state." I crossed my arms. "And I've got proof you're stealing my water. What's that worth to you?" Her face froze for a second, but she recovered fast. "You don't know what you're talking about," she snapped. Tom stepped closer, his voice low. "Back off, kid, or you'll regret it." I didn't budge. "Get off my property." They left, but I knew they weren't done. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Dad, how he'd fought to keep this ranch through tough times. I wasn't going to let these people take it. The next morning, Mike called with big news. "John, that pipe's illegal. The HOA never filed for water rights. You could shut it down and fine them for years of usage." My heart raced. This was my chance. I hired a surveyor to mark the exact property line, and I started planning. But then, another twist hit. I got an email from the county saying someone had filed a complaint against my ranch for environmental violations. It claimed I was polluting the creek. I knew it was the HOA's doing. They were trying to bury me in fake charges. I drove to the county office, ready to fight, but the clerk dropped a bigger bomb. "Mr. Carter, the HOA's claiming your dad sold them that land years ago. They've got a document with his signature." I felt like the ground dropped out. Dad would never sell our land. That signature had to be fake. I stormed out, my mind racing. The HOA was playing dirty, but I wasn't giving up. I went back to the ranch and dug through Dad's files again. Deep in a drawer, I found an old letter from the HOA dated 12 years back. It offered Dad $10,000 for temporary access to the creek. He'd written an O in big red letters across it. I smiled. They thought they could forge his name, but I had proof he'd never agreed to anything. The fight was far from over, and I was just getting started. I held Dad's old letter in my hand, the big red N.O. staring back at me. The HOA thought they could fake his signature and steal my ranch, but I was one step ahead. That night, I sat up late, piecing together my plan. The forged document they showed the county was a lie, and I had proof they'd been after our land for years. But the HOA wasn't playing fair, and I knew they'd hit harder. The next morning, I got a call from Mike at the water board. "John, you won't believe this," he said. "That pipe on your land? It's not just feeding their houses. It's tied to their whole community's water system. Shut it off, and Lakeview Estates goes dry." My eyes widened. This wasn't just leverage, it was a knockout punch. I told Mike to keep it quiet while I figured out my next move. But before I could act, the HOA threw another curveball. A truck rolled up to the ranch, and two guys in suits got out, one holding a clipboard. "Mr. Carter, we're from a county," the taller one said. "We're inspecting your property for those environmental violations." I knew it was a setup. The HOA had sent them to scare me. I let them walk the creek, watching them like a hawk. They poked around, took some water samples, and left without a word. That afternoon, I got an email saying my ranch was under investigation for toxic runoff. If they proved it, I'd lose the land. My stomach twisted, but I wasn't buying their game. I called a friend, Lisa, who ran a testing lab. "John, send me those creek samples," she said. "I'll check if they're faking this." I sent her the water I'd collected myself, praying she'd find something. While I waited, Margaret Hayes sent me a text. "Drop your claims, or we'll make sure you lose everything." I didn't reply, but her words lit a fire in me. I went back to the creek and followed that pipe. It led to a locked pump house right on the edge of my property. I snapped a picture of the HOA's logo on the door. They weren't even hiding it anymore. That night, Lisa called. "John, the creek's clean. No toxins. But I found something weird. Traces of chemicals used in pool maintenance. The HOA's been dumping their runoff into your creek." I clenched my fist. They were framing me for their own mess. I was about to call Mike when my phone buzzed again. It was an unknown number. Mr. Carter, you're digging too deep, a low voice said. Stop, or you'll wish you had. The line went dead. My heart pounded, but I wasn't backing down. The next day, I met with a lawyer, Sarah, who'd helped Dad years ago. I showed her the letter with Dad's NO, the pipe photos, and Lisa's water report. John, this is huge, Sarah said. We can sue them for fraud, water theft, and environmental damage. But we need more. I nodded. I'm not done digging. That evening, I went through Dad's files again and found a yellowed envelope. Inside was a photo of Dad shaking hands with a man I didn't know, dated 15 years back. On the back, Dad had written, HOA deal, never trust them. My mind raced. Who was this guy? I posted the photo online, asking if anyone knew him. Hours later, a stranger messaged me. That's my uncle, Paul Grayson. He used to work for Lakeview Estates. I called the number they gave me. Paul answered, his voice shaky. Your dad warned me about the HOA, he said. They tried to bribe him for your land. When he said no, they got nasty. I leaned forward. Nasty how? Paul paused. They threatened to burn his barn down. That's why he kept that letter. My blood ran cold. The HOA wasn't just greedy, they were dangerous. I thanked Paul and hung up, my hands trembling with rage. They'd gone after Dad, and now they were coming for me. But I had a plan, and it was going to hit them where it hurt. Paul's words echoed in my head. The HOA had threatened to burn Dad's barn. They weren't just stealing my land, they'd been bullies for years. I wasn't going to let them win. The next morning, I drove to the ranch, my mind set on hitting back. I called Sarah, my lawyer, and told her about Paul's story. John, if we can prove they threatened your dad, it's game over for them, she said. Get me more evidence. I hung up, ready to dig deeper, but the HOA was already one step ahead. As I pulled up to the ranch, I saw a tow truck hauling my pickup away. A guy in a Lakeview Estates jacket stood nearby, smirking. You parked on our property, he said, pointing to a new no parking sign on my own land. I clenched my fists. That's my ranch. He shrugged and drove off. I called the sheriff, but he said it was a civil matter. The HOA was playing dirty, and I was done playing nice. I went to the creek and checked the pump house again. The lock was new, but I noticed something odd. A small camera, hidden in the bushes, pointed at the pipe. They were watching me. My skin crawled, but I saw my chance. I waved at the camera, then took a crowbar from my shed and smashed the pipe's valve. Water sprayed everywhere, soaking the ground. If they wanted war, I'd cut their water off. That afternoon, Margaret Hayes called, her voice shaking with rage. You're destroying our community, she yelled. Fix that pipe, or we'll bury you in court. I laughed. You're stealing my water, Margaret. I'm just taking it back. She hung up, but I knew they'd hit harder. Sure enough, that night, I got a letter from the county saying my ranch's deed was under review because of a discrepancy. The HOA was claiming Dad had signed over 2 acres before he died. I knew it was another fake, but it scared me. If they messed with the deed, I could lose everything. I called Paul again. Did my dad ever mention signing anything? I asked. Paul sighed. No, but the HOA tried to trick him. They sent a guy to his house with papers saying it was for taxes. Your dad threw him out. My heart raced. They tried to forge Dad's signature even back then. I needed more proof. I went through Dad's files and found an old notebook. Inside, he'd written about a man named Carl, an HOA worker who'd warned him about their plans. I tracked Carl down through an old phone number. He was nervous, but agreed to meet. At a diner the next day, Carl looked over his shoulder before talking. Your dad was a good man, he said. The HOA wanted your land for a golf course. When he said no, they started messing with him, slashed his tires, cut his fences. I leaned in. Did you see them forge anything? Carl nodded. I saw Margaret with a fake deed. She bragged about it. My blood boiled. This was the proof I needed. But as I left the diner, a black SUV followed me. It stayed close, too close, all the way to the ranch. When I parked, the driver rolled down his window. You're making enemies, Carter, he said, then sped off. My hands shook, but I wasn't stopping. I called Sarah and told her about Carl. If he'll testify, we can nail them, she said. But be careful. They're desperate. That night, I set up a plan. I hired a crew to build a fence along the real property line, right through the HOA's backyards. By morning, the fence was up, cutting off their pools and patios. The homeowners went nuts, yelling over the fence, but I didn't care. Then Mike called with a twist. John, I checked the county records. That pump house? It's not even permitted. They built it without approval. I grinned. The HOA was crumbling, but they weren't done fighting. As I walked the ranch, I saw smoke rising from a barn. My heart stopped. Someone had set it on fire. Smoke poured from the barn, and my heart pounded as I ran toward it. The HOA had gone too far, setting fire to Dad's legacy to scare me off. I grabbed a hose, but the flames were too big. I called 911, and firefighters showed up fast, battling the blaze. As they worked, I saw Margaret Hayes watching from across the fence, her face blank. "This is on you," I muttered under my breath. The sheriff arrived, and I told him about the HOA's threats. He nodded, but said, "No proof, John. Could have been an accident." I knew it wasn't. The barn was half gone, but I wasn't broken. I was furious. The next day, I met Sarah at her office. "They burned my barn," I said, slamming Carl's story on her desk. "He'll testify they forged papers and planned this." Sarah's eyes lit up. "If Carl talks, we can charge them with arson and fraud. But we need him in court." I called Carl, but his phone was off. My gut twisted. Something was wrong. I drove to his house, a small place outside town. The door was cracked open, and inside, the place was trashed, papers everywhere, furniture flipped. Carl was gone. On the table, I found a note. "Stay quiet, or you're next." The HOA had gotten to him. I took the note and called Sarah. "They've scared Carl off," I said. "But I'm not stopping." She warned me to watch my back. That afternoon, I went to the ranch and found a new surprise. Someone had spray-painted "sell or else" across the house. The HOA was tightening the screws, but I had a trick up my sleeve. I called Mike at the water board. "Can we shut off their water now?" I asked. He chuckled. "Already filed the paperwork. That illegal pump house is done. They'll be dry by tomorrow." I smiled, but the victory felt hollow with the barn gone. That night, I got a call from an unknown number. "John, it's Carl," a shaky voice whispered. "They took me to a motel, told me to leave town. I'm hiding now." My pulse raced. "Where are you?" He gave me an address, and I drove out, heart pounding. At the motel, Carl looked like a ghost. "Margaret paid a guy to torch your barn," he said. "I heard her on the phone." I recorded every word. "You're testifying?" I told him. He nodded, scared but ready. As we left, headlights flashed behind us. The same black SUV from before was tailing us. I floored it, weaving through back roads until I lost them. My hands gripped the wheel tight. The HOA was desperate, and that made them dangerous. The next morning, Mike called with bigger news. "John, I dug deeper. The HOA's been selling water from your creek to other developments. They're making millions." My jaw dropped. This wasn't just about Lakeview Estates, it was a whole scam. I told Sarah, and she started drafting a lawsuit for water theft, fraud, and arson. But the HOA struck again. I got a letter saying they'd filed a lien on my ranch for unpaid fines. It was fake, but it could tie up my land for years. I was raging, but then Paul, the old HOA worker, called. "John, I found something your dad left," he said. "Meet me at the creek." I drove out, and Paul handed me a metal box buried near the pump house. Inside was a signed affidavit from Dad, dated a year before he died. It said the HOA had tried to forge his signature and threatened his life. My eyes burned. Dad had known they'd come for me. I called Sarah with the news, but as I hung up, I heard a noise behind me. A man in a hoodie stood by the creek, holding a gas can. "You don't learn, do you?" he said, stepping closer. I backed up, my heart racing. The HOA wasn't just fighting, they were ready to kill. The man with the gas can stepped closer, his face hidden in the hoodie's shadow. My heart hammered as I backed toward the creek, clutching Dad's affidavit tight. "You're done, Carter," he growled, raising the can like he'd pour it on me. I didn't think, just ran, dodging through the trees. He chased, but I knew the ranch better. I lost him in the dark and hid behind a shed, my breath loud in my ears. The HOA wasn't just threatening now, they wanted me gone for good. I waited till it was quiet, then snuck back to my truck and drove to Sarah's office. They tried to kill me, I told her, handing over the affidavit. Her eyes widened as she read it. John, this proves they threatened your dad. With Carl's testimony, we can bury them. I nodded, but my mind was on that hooded man. Who was he? The next day, I got a call from Mike. John, the water shutoff worked. Lakeview Estates is dry. The homeowners are furious. I grinned, but it didn't last. An hour later, Margaret Hayes and 2 men in suits showed up at the ranch. You've gone too far, she said, her voice sharp. Turn the water back on, or we'll make sure you disappear. I stood my ground. You're the ones breaking the law. I've got proof. One of the men, a guy with cold eyes, leaned in. Proof won't help if you're not around. My stomach flipped, but I didn't flinch. Try me, I said. They left, but I knew time was running out. I called Carl, who was hiding at a friend's place. I'm ready to testify, he said. But they're watching me. I told him to stay low and sent Sarah his location. That afternoon, I went to the county office to check on the fake lien. The clerk looked nervous. Mr. Carter, someone paid me to file that lien, she whispered. It was Margaret's assistant. My jaw tightened. The HOA's web was bigger than I thought. I recorded her confession on my phone and sent it to Sarah. But then a new twist hit. I got an email from the sheriff's office saying they'd found evidence of arson in my barn, and they were blaming me. My blood boiled. The HOA had framed me for their own crime. I called the sheriff and demanded a meeting. You've got the wrong guy, I told him, showing the note from Carl's house and the clerk's confession. He frowned. This is serious, John. But I need more to clear you. I left, my mind racing. That night, I went back to the ranch and found a package on my porch. Inside was a USB drive with a note. Watch this. I plugged it into my laptop and a grainy video played. It showed Margaret and the hooded man talking in a parking lot. Get rid of Carter, she said. Burn the ranch if you have to. My hands shook. This was proof of everything. But as the video ended, my phone rang. It was Lisa from the testing lab. John, I analyzed more creek samples. The HOA's been dumping chemicals for years, not just pool stuff, industrial waste. My eyes widened. They weren't just stealing water, they were poisoning my land. I called Sarah and sent her the video and Lisa's report. This is enough for a criminal case, she said. But we need to move fast. I agreed, but as I hung up, I heard glass shatter downstairs. I grabbed a flashlight and crept to the kitchen. A rock lay on the floor, wrapped in a note. Last warning. I looked outside and saw headlights speeding away. My heart raced, but I wasn't scared anymore. I called Mike. File the water theft fines now, I said, and tell the county about the chemicals. The next morning, I got a call from Paul. John, I remembered something. Your dad had a friend, a retired judge, who knew about the HOA's tricks. My pulse quickened. Who? Paul gave me a name, Judge Henry Walsh. I tracked him down and called. Your dad told me the HOA was crooked, Henry said. I've got old files that can help. I felt a spark of hope, but as I hung up, I saw smoke again, this time from the creek. Someone had set the pump house on fire. Flames shot up from the pump house, lighting the night sky. I sprinted toward the creek, my heart pounding. The HOA had burned my barn, and now they were torching the pump house to cover their tracks. I called 911, but by the time firefighters arrived, the structure was gone. The sheriff showed up, eyeing me. Another fire, John? Looks bad for you. I gritted my teeth. Check the cameras, I said, pointing to the one I'd found by the creek. The HOA did this. He promised to look, but I didn't trust him. I called Sarah and told her about the fire and Judge Walsh. Get those files from him, she said, and stay safe. I drove to Henry Walsh's house that morning, my nerves on edge. The retired judge was old but sharp. Your dad came to me years ago, he said, handing me a folder. The HOA tried to bribe me to ignore their land grab. I kept records. Inside were emails, photos, and a signed statement from Dad about their threats. My hand shook. This was dynamite. Why didn't you stop them? I asked. Henry sighed. I tried, but they had powerful friends. I thanked him and left, but as I got in my truck, I noticed a car parked down the street. It was the black SUV. They were still watching. I called Carl, who was still hiding. I'm coming to court, he said. But they're following me too. I told him to meet Sarah at System. The message was truncated. Here's the completion and continuation. Meet at her office for safety. Back at the ranch, I checked the creek camera's footage. The video was blurry, but it showed a man in a hoodie starting the pump house fire. I sent it to Sarah and the sheriff, then hid the folder from Judge Walsh in Dad's old safe. That afternoon, Margaret Hayes called. You're finished, Carter, she hissed. We've got a witness who says you burned that pump house. I laughed. You mean the guy you paid? I've got video, Margaret. She went quiet, then hung up. I knew she was planning something big. That night, I met Sarah and Carl at her office. Carl looked terrified, but ready. I'll tell the judge everything, he said. Margaret ordered the barn fire and the forgery. Sarah nodded. With the video, the folder, and Carl's testimony, we've got them for arson, fraud, and water theft. But we need to move fast. As we left, I saw the black SUV outside. I told Carl to stay with Sarah, then drove to the ranch. When I got there, the front door was open. Inside, the safe was busted, and the folder was gone. My stomach dropped. The HOA had broken in. I called Sarah, but then I heard tires screech outside. 2 men jumped out of a van, one holding a bat. You're done, Carter, he yelled, swinging at me. I dodged and ran to the shed, grabbing a shovel. I swung hard, knocking the bat from his hand. The other guy tackled me, but I kicked him off and ran to my truck. They chased me, but I sped away, heart racing. I called Mike. The HOA stole the evidence, I said. He cursed. John, they're saying you attacked their security team. There's a warrant out for you. I slammed the steering wheel. They'd framed me again. I hid at a motel and called Judge Walsh. They took your files, I told him. He wasn't surprised. I kept copies, he said. Meet me tomorrow at the courthouse. I barely slept, knowing the HOA was closing in. The next morning, I got a text from an unknown number. Turn yourself in, or we burn the whole ranch. I ignored it and met Walsh at the courthouse. He handed me a USB with scanned copies of the folder. Your dad would be proud, he said. I smiled, but then Sarah called. John, the HOA's filing an emergency motion to seize your ranch today. They claim you're a danger. My blood boiled. They were trying to take everything before we could fight back. I told Sarah about the USB and Carl. Get him to court now, I said. As I hung up, I saw the sheriff's car pull up. John Carter, you're under arrest, he said, cuffing me. I didn't fight. I had one last card to play, and it was going to bring the HOA down. The sheriff's cuffs bit into my wrists as he led me into the courthouse. The HOA thought they'd won, framing me for arson and trying to seize my ranch. But I had Judge Walsh's USB, Carl's testimony, and a fire in my gut to finish this. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Margaret Hayes sat with her lawyers, smirking like she'd already taken my land. Sarah met my eyes and nodded. She had everything ready. The judge, a stern woman, called the case. Mr. Carter, you're accused of arson and assault, she said. I stood tall. I'm innocent, Your Honor. The HOA's framing me. Margaret's lawyer laughed. He's a danger, Your Honor. Seize his ranch now. Sarah stood. We have evidence that proves otherwise. She played the USB's video of Margaret ordering my ranch burned. The room gasped. Then Carl took the stand, his voice steady. Margaret paid for the barn fire and forged papers to steal John's land, he said. The judge's eyes narrowed. Margaret's smirk vanished. Sarah handed over Dad's affidavit, the creek camera footage, and Lisa's report on the HOA's chemical dumping. They stole water, poisoned the land, and threatened John's life, Sarah said. The judge called a recess to review. Margaret stormed over. You'll regret this, Carter, she hissed. I smiled. You're done, Margaret. An hour later, the judge returned. The evidence is overwhelming, she said. The HOA's claims are dismissed. Margaret Hayes, you're under investigation for fraud, arson, and environmental crimes. The crowd murmured as deputies cuffed her. But the twists weren't over. Judge Walsh stood up. I've known John's dad for years, he said. He was my friend, and I'm his uncle. This ranch stays with John. My jaw dropped. Dad's uncle was a judge? The room buzzed. Margaret's face went white as she was led away. The judge awarded me $2 million for the land theft, water fines, and damages. The HOA had to pay for the creek cleanup and shut down their illegal operations. Outside, Sarah hugged me. You did it, John. I nodded, but my eyes were on the ranch. I used the money to rebuild the barn and house, turning the land into a community farm. The new HOA board, free of Margaret's grip, apologized and invited me to their meetings. I went, bringing Dad's favorite apple pie recipe, baked from our orchard. As we ate, I thought of Dad. He'd fought for this land, and so had I. The lesson hit me hard. Standing up for what's yours takes guts, but it's worth it. Sometimes, justice comes when you hold your ground, no matter how big the fight.